It was a cold winter's night when 7 people decided to go on one last ride on the ghost train at Sydney's Luna Park. They wouldn't come out alive. One last ride, the ghost train fire, coming up right after this on Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. Hi everyone, welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I'm your host Belinda Brady, and welcome guys. Welcome to my little podcast where I discuss all things crime and murder that's happened in Australia recently and several decades or 100 odd years ago. Now, if I sound a little off, I do apologise. I've got a bit of a problem with a tooth. I'm either staring at it down an extraction or a root canal, and it's making me feel a bit yuck. I'm not feeling the best. So I do apologise if I come across as a bit yucky this episode. Hopefully by the time I record the next one, I'll be better and I would have had some kind of resolution. No doubt expensive, because if you are listening to me from Australia, you know how insanely expensive dental work is here. It's criminal what they charge. It truly, truly is. Now, welcome guys. Welcome to my podcast. I digress. I am currently drinking just a black coffee with some sweeteners. I've run out of my favourite syrup and I'm kind of been a bit slack in ordering it. So I will get there eventually, but I do like the odd black coffee with a bit of equal in it, which is just sweetener, and I'm happy to have that. So, and a massive shout out to my listeners, my awesome listeners. Some of you are making yourselves very known, and I love that. I've got a few people tuning in from Scotland. Love Scotland, one of the coldest places I have ever been to, but I do love Scotland. Okay, and I do have people tuning in from Vietnam, France, and Ireland. Love that. And of course, the top 3 is Australia, the US, and New Zealand. Keep it up, guys. And please let me know where you're listening to me from. I love hearing from you. Reach out to me via my Buzzsprout website. You can buy me a coffee. You can send me a text. You can reach out to me via YouTube. I do read your messages, even though I sometimes am a little bit slow with it, so I do apologise. But please let me know where you're listening to me from. And this is my 50th episode, guys. Happy 50th. We don't look a day over 21, I promise. Anyway, however you're listening to me, if you're listening to me in the car, at the gym, while you're walking, while you're settling down for the night, however you're listening to me, settle in, lend me your ears, and let's get into it. Let's get into one last ride, the ghost train fire. And my sources for this episode are abc.net.au, coronernewsnewsouthwales.gov.au, smh.com.au, policenewsouthwales.gov.au, monumentaustralia.org, mamamia.com.au, and a little bit from reddit.com. Now, theme parks are fun, and that's why we go, isn't it? Like, there's so much to do. You can eat, you can drink, you can go on the rides until you throw up. It is so much fun. But not all trips to a theme park are a fun affair, and sometimes people go there and they never come home. And this is the case with the tragic events of one winter's night in 1979 at Sydney's famed Luna Park. Now, Luna Park was built in 1935 at Milson's Point in New South Wales, which is just a stone's throw from Sydney. Now, the park itself is on prime real estate. I used to go past it when I commuted to Sydney for work, and honestly, it is right on the waterfront overlooking the harbour. It's beautiful. It has the best views. And this adds to the appeal of the park. You can be scared out of your mind on a roller coaster but have $1 million view in front of you. It's amazing. Now, the park is your typical theme park. It has, the roller coaster, Ferris wheels, mazes, greasy food, and at one point it had a ghost train. And the park was really popular during the World War II and post-war as it was a place where families could go and have fun and forget about what was going on in the world around them. And it also was a sore point for many a developer who would give anything to get their hands on that prime piece of real estate. And one prominent developer had his sights set firmly on that land. Now, the 70s in Australia, particularly in Sydney and around King's Cross, which is the famous nightclub district, was rife with corruption and underhand dealings, and Sydney was no different. And one man in particular ruled the roost and gained the reputation as being the boss of the cross, as in King's Cross, and that man was Abe Saffron. Abe was into everything and anything that you could make a quick buck from. Abe started out in the business young, and he got his start in King's Cross by moving black market alcohol through a nightclub called the Roosevelt Club. He did this to beat the wartime alcohol rations, and he made a mint in doing so. So he was smart enough to see a loophole there, and he exploited it for his own financial gain. Years later, he then went on to buy liquor licenses for a string of Sydney pubs, and he used the alcohol purchased for the pub to flow through the nightclubs he owned, and he sold that legit alcohol at black market prices. So he would get himself a liquor license for an establishment that he owned. So he would then sell that legit alcohol at black market prices, so pretty much selling legal alcohol at double the price, and again made a fortune doing that. Now, he had his hand in everything from booze to property development to prostitution, and if you wanted to do your business in the cross, you needed to deal with Abe. He's been widely suspected of being involved in the disappearance of a journalist who was investigating his dealings, and I will cover her down the track, and her story is really, really quite scary, but I will cover that in another episode. He also had friends in high places, as many of them do, and he was friends with crooked cops and politicians, and he had his eye on where Luna Park was. Like I said, it was prime real estate. Now, by 1979, the land was leased by the New South Wales government, and they were working on renewing the lease to the property developers Leon Fink and Nathan Spat. Now, the Premier of New South Wales at the time, Neville Wran, and Leon and Nathan were on good terms with him. The guys who currently have the lease for Luna Park were on good terms with Neville Wran until they weren't. Now, apparently things went sour over a lunch, and the Premier reportedly told the two that they wouldn't be getting the lease. And it was rumoured that one Abe Saffron wanted the lease, depending on who you believed. And he was on good terms with Neville Wran. But of course, nothing concrete has ever come from that set of allegations. Now, come June 1979, the park was still open, and despite the battle behind the scenes for the land, the park was up and running and ready to welcome the public. And on the night of the 9th of June 1979, people were filling the park up and ready to have a great night. It was the dead of winter, the night was cold, but that didn't stop the crowd. And it certainly didn't stop family of four, John, Jenny, and their two sons, Damien and Craig Godson. Now, Jenny and John were on holiday from their country town of Warren, New South Wales, with their two young sons, Damien, who was 6, and Craig, who was 4. And they wasted no time seeing the sights of Sydney. And the 9th of June was their last day in Sydney, or the Big Smoke, as country folk like to call it. And they were heading back home the following day. And they spent their last day at Taronga Zoo before heading back to the city for dinner and making their way to Luna Park. Now, in a rather ominous moment, as the family were waiting for the ferry to take them across the water from Circular Quay, because you could catch a ferry over to Luna Park, they were approached by a man in a horned mask. kind of looked a bit like, a devil's mask. Now, the man stood behind 6-year-old Damien, put his hand on his shoulder, and someone took a photo of the two. The family thought nothing of it, then boarded the ferry and made their way to Luna Park. Meanwhile, 13-year-old friends Richard Carroll, Jonathan Billings, Seamus Rahili, Michael Johnson and 12-year-old Jason Holman had been given permission to go to the park on their own without any adults, a monumentous moment for any teenager, and one that the boys had been at their parents about for weeks, and they were stoked to be out on the town at the park doing what they loved without, I guess, parents dragging them down. Now, the boys spent that Saturday playing rugby and going to church with their families before heading off to Luna Park on their own, and they were so excited. They were so excited. Now, the Godson family were there. They were having a ball together. All 4 of them went on the rides before it was time to head back to their hotel. Now, John and Jenny asked their sons what ride they wanted to go on before they left, and the boys answered the ghost train. The ghost train was really popular. It was a popular ride. There was always a lineup for it, and 9 times out of 10 people went on it more than once. It was just that much of a fun ride to go on. And as the family started to make their way to the ride, Jenny was hit with a craving for ice cream, something she didn't normally eat. And because it was winter and it was cold, not something you would really crave. But Jenny said the craving was so strong. She asked her husband and her sons to wait for her while she went to get one. When she came back, her husband and sons were gone. So she went to follow them. She was like, okay, they've gone to the ghost train. I'll make my way. But what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Smoke was pouring out of the ghost train doors. Meanwhile, the excited teens, Richard, Jonathan, Seamus, Michael and Jason, were also enjoying one more ride before they went home, and they too chose to go on the ghost train again. Now, the boys lined up, and when it was their turn to board the ride, Jason watched his friends, Jonathan and Richard, go in one carriage, Michael and Seamus in the other, and Jason was on a carriage behind them on his own. Now, he watched his two sets of friends go through the swinging entry doors that were marked Hell's Doorway. Now, this was around 10 p.m, but just as his carriage nudged that doorway, out of nowhere, a Luna Park attendant pulled him from his seat. Now, Jason was pissed. He wanted to go on this ride with his friends. He couldn't understand why he was being pulled off this ride, but he recalled the man who pulled him off had a panicked look written all over his face. Jason was confused. He didn't hear anything, see anything, or smell anything. But inside the ghost train, inside that ride that he had just been stopped from going into, was a very, very different story. What his friends didn't know as they went through the doors marked Hell's Doorway was that a fire had broken out deep within the ride. Smoke began to escape from the doors, but given it was a ghost-themed ride, those waiting thought nothing of it. They thought it was part of the ride. And those who were inside the ride, approximately 35 people, mistook the flames they saw for fake flames. This was not helped by the fact that the fire started in an imitation fireplace that had paper flames, so a fake fireplace. So some thought that the real flames were fake until they realised they weren't. Now, witnesses later record seeing walls of flames in front of them as they waited for the ride, with some saying the flames were 4 meters high. Ride operators quickly began to pull people out of the ride cars as they entered and exited the tunnel that took you in and out of the ride. This of course included Jason. Now, the fire brigade were called at approximately 10:15, and they were up against it the moment they arrived. They struggled to get into the park as thousands ran to get out of it. They then found the water pressure on the site, on the fire hydrants that were in the park, was weak, and the hoses leaked like sieves when they turned them on. So they had to reposition their trucks near the Sydney harbour so they could use the water from there, so they could pump the water from the harbour to put the fire out. But they also had to set up a relay pump to get water from one truck to another. It was just a comedy of errors. And meanwhile, the fire took a ferocious hold of the ghost train, which was built of highly combustible materials. You got to remember, guys, it was the 70s. They didn't have the fireproof stuff that we have now. The fire was that intense and that huge, it could be seen from across the harbour. The fire spread to the nearby Toyland area of the river caves, and at 11:17 p.m., it was finally put out an hour after it started. It was around 11:30 p.m. that the ruins of the ride could be searched for any survivors or victims, and there the bodies of John, Damien and Craig Godson were found. They had left their car to try and find safety or an exit, and they were found with John huddling over his young sons, trying to shield them from the flames. The bodies of Richard, Jonathan, Seamus, Michael, the 13-year-olds who were so excited to be allowed out without any parents to dampen their night, were found in another section of the ride, bringing the number of people who died in the ghost train fire to 7. And in 1 hour of pure horror, Jenny Godson had lost her entire family, and Jason Holman had lost his best friends, and their families had lost their sons. A fun night out had turned into everyone's worst nightmare. The ride was destroyed, leaving behind burnt cars and bits of wood. And a prop from the ride, which was a cutout of a skeleton that could be seen leering out from the wreckage of the ride, and where 7 people had lost their lives. Now, while taking photos to document the scene, fire crew took photos of the switchboard, which was completely intact. And remember this, because if the fire was started from an electrical fault, the switchboard would have blown. There would have been damage to that. So just remember that the fire crew took photos of a intact switchboard. Now, police were very quick to state that the cause of the fire was electrical fault, and even began cleaning up the scene the day after. But witnesses started to come forward with a very, very different story, and then just as quickly as they came forward, they just as quickly retracted it. There were several claims of a bikie gang being seen on the ride just before the fire broke out, and one witness even claimed he heard one of them say, "I spread the kerosene and I lit it with a match," to which one replied, "You shouldn't have done that," and another voice saying, "Come on, let's split." Now, another witness, a man by the name of Les Dowd, is one of those witnesses, and Les spent most of his life in and out of foster homes. He said at this stage in his life, going to Luna Park was the best thing he had ever done. He was so excited to be going there. He was there that fateful night with another friend, Tina. Les was 17, Tina was 14. And they both remember seeing a group of males all huddled together near the ghost train ride. They looked around 18. They were wearing denim jeans and jackets, and they gave off a strong bikie vibe. Bikie is Australian slang for outlaw motorcycle gang. Everywhere in the world has them, and we call them bikies here in Australia. And Les heard one of them say he spread the kerosene out and lit it with a match. This was met with another male telling him he was a fool for doing it. Moments later, Les saw smoke pouring out of the ghost train. Later on that night, Les found a police officer and told him what he had seen. And later that night, when he went back to the refuge where he lived, the police called looking for him. Les was then taken to the police station and interviewed at 2:40 a.m. in the morning after the fire, and the cop involved in this interview took the arson allegation very, very seriously. Now, police put out an alert to find the males that Les had seen at 6 a.m. So at 6 a.m. the morning after the fire, there was a statewide alert to keep an eye out for these bikies. 9 hours later, that was called off. And it was called off by a man called Doug Knight, Detective Inspector Doug Knight. He was leading the investigation and he called that search off. Les was then brought in for a second interview. And it's worth saying here that Les was only 17. He should have had an adult present with him, but he didn't. Now, the refuge manager, Julie, she was close with Les and she looked after her clients. And she said she should have been present as he was only 17, but she wasn't, and nor was she invited to be present. And police went on to tell Les that his story was false and made up, and they also told him that the fire was caused by an electrical fault. And Les was scared. He was scared of physical violence or retributions for not following along with the police, so he changed his statement. Les was then charged with giving a false statement to police and fined a couple of $100. Les now deeply regrets taking back his statement. But I can see where Les was coming from. He's a 17-year-old kid. He has seen something absolutely horrific, and he's got police telling him to take his statement back. You know, it's just horrible. Poor kid, my heart goes out to him. And Les's friend Tina, who also backed this original statement, she didn't change hers. She stuck to her statement, and she did say she felt as though they were in trouble and that they were being hounded to deviate from the original story. Now, when the Ghost Train fire went to the coroner's court, they were not called to give evidence. That they just felt like they weren't being listened to again, that their eyewitness statements were just being dismissed. Now, several other witnesses backed up the claims of seeing bikies. They also said they smelled kerosene, and the police didn't follow up on one of these claims, not one. Meanwhile, on the 15th of June 1979, a funeral was held for the friends who had died on the ride: Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Michael Johnson and Seamus Rahili in St Mary's Cathedral, Sydney. 4,000 mourners packed the sombre service, while a separate service for John Godson and his sons Damien and Craig was held in their hometown of Warren. Now, a coronial inquest ruled that the fire had been started by a mechanical fault, despite tests revealing that the ride had been structurally sound, and the park closed for 3 years after that. Now, rumours swirled about police corruption, bikie involvement, the involvement of Abe Saffron. Nothing come to pass, and I guess life went on. For those who weren't in amongst it, life went on. Now, Luna Park reopened in 1982 before it closed for development in 1988, where it reopened in 1995, but it was closed again due to noise complaints. It reopened after a few, little redevelopments, some reconstruction. It reopened in 2004 and has been operating ever since. Now, though the official cause of the fire was listed as a mechanical fault, many believe it was arson, and many believe Abe Saffron was linked to it. And with corruption rife in the 70s and 80s amongst the police and politicians, it is very possible. In fact, in 2021, a former New South Wales police detective claimed he was behind the fire. He claimed Abe Saffron was behind the fire, and the detective in charge of the investigation, Detective Inspector Doug Knight, also known as the Fixer, was in on it. Now, they claimed that Doug Knight would delete, change and manipulate, as well as intimidate witnesses. So he would tamper with evidence, and it is claimed he was being paid off by at least one organised criminal. It was also alleged that the fire was organised to force the park's leaseholders out and to make way for a more lucrative development. and that many politicians and police made sure the truth was covered up or near impossible to find. One retired cop even went as far to say, there is no doubt Saffron was behind that fire at Luna Park. And in 2007, Abe's niece Anne Buckingham told a Sydney newspaper that her uncle was behind the fire, but I don't think people were meant to die. Now, she later retracted that statement, and Abe's son Alan has repeatedly denied his father's involvement. Now, Abe Saffron died in 2006, taking the truth with him. And as of right now, there is $1 million reward for any information about the fire and the people behind it. Minister for Police and Emergency Services David Elliott has said, you now have 1 million reasons to come forward. This is a very unique reward. It does not require a charge or a conviction of any person. It relates to the information about the ghost train fire. So if you know something, if you know anything, no matter how little you think it might be, please come forward. You could finally help uncover the truth about that horrible night that claimed the lives of 7 innocent victims, 6 of them children who were doing nothing more than having fun at a theme park. You have 1 million reasons to do it. My heart goes out to the victims of that horrific fire and their loved ones, their friends and their families. And my heart goes out to those who witnessed that horrific fire and the grief they've had to deal with afterwards. And there we have it, guys. The story of people who went to a theme park on a cold winter's night to have some fun. One family was wrapping up a family holiday. Another group was excited young schoolboys, their first night out without their parents, and they never came home. It's just, you can't even fathom it. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And like I've just said before, if you do know anything, if you have any information, please get in contact with your local authorities. And as always, thank you for your company, guys. You can subscribe to me. You can buy me a coffee. You can buy my books. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. You can find me. You can come say hello. And if you subscribe, you get bonus ghost story episodes. You know you want to hear them. Come join me. Okay, guys, as always, thank you so much for your company. You're all rock stars. And hopefully next episode I have an update about this stupid tooth. Take care of your teeth, guys. They're expensive and they're painful. And that's my closing thought for the day. Thank you again for your company, guys. You're all awesome. And until next time, guys, stay safe, stay cool, stay caffeinated, and I will catch you all later.